let's iron our seams. Just a little tip, I do not iron my seam allowances apart like most people tell you to do. And the reason I don't is because if you iron them apart, you can sometimes see your stitching on the right side. Instead, I lay my seams to one side. So when you're sewing with different weights of fabric like mine, what I like to do is I like to iron my heaviest weighted fabric toward the lighter weight side. So this is a very heavyweight fabric, so when I iron it, I'm going to try to keep it toward the lighter weight side. But remember, we're sewing a patch in the middle of this, and we have a lot of seams coming together here on the underside. So it's important for us to lay our seams all going in the same direction. So if I start with this really heavy fabric and I lay it to my right, then this one will be laid to the right, and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and start ironing. I'm just going to iron my seams down, all going in the same direction. So here I am, just laying them down. I'm ironing my lotus petals as well, just so it'll look pretty, because once we finish ironing, I want to show you what my pillow looks like. I would also love to see what your pillow looks like at this point. I'm very interested in that. All right, so I have my top piece with all of my seams going in one direction. So I want to just show you my top piece. I'm very pleased with the way that it came out. I love all of my fabric choices, and I'm glad that I took some time to plan it out and decide where I wanted my fabric to go. All right, so I am going to bring my bottom piece up, and I want to show you, since all of my seams are going in this direction, I'm going to lay right sides together and make sure that I know that if the seams are going in this direction on my top piece, then my bottom piece, they need to go the opposite direction. So I'm just going to hold, I know that this one has to go, my bottom pieces have to go in this direction. I'm going to remove my top piece, and I've held it down so I know that my seams need to lay going in this direction, so clockwise. I'm going to just come around, iron around, making sure that I'm going in the same direction. And the reason we want that is because when we sew our patch on, you'll see when you pin your patch on, that's a lot of seams coming together in the middle. So I'm going to set my iron aside for just a second while I show you my bottom piece. All right, I'm just going to tell you, I am thrilled with this fabric. Hold on, I'm going to iron this wrinkle out. I am thrilled with the way that it turned out. And even though I planned this before, because I have done some upholstery work, and I know that when you're doing stripes, you only cut one piece at a time and you make all your stripes going in the same direction. But what I didn't realize was how cool that was going to look, because this is my seam, and I just love this. And I'm just going to tell you that my next pillow is going to be a complete pillow with this as my top and this is my bottom, and then my dimensional piece will follow the same pattern. So maybe you want to try a stripe next, and maybe gift your pillow to a fellow yogi friend. So all right, now while we're here, I'm also going to iron my strap. This is a 4 by 10 inch piece, And I choose my fabric for my strap based on, I like a thicker strap, and also I like to get a little bit darker strap. I'm just going to iron it together so that it's laying nicely. And I've also taken the time to iron my little piece for the zipper. I've just ironed it in half, so I'm setting that aside so I don't lose it. All right, so bring one of your, either the top or the bottom, it doesn't matter, to your table in front of you, and get your patch or your label, whatever you have. I hope you have one. If you don't, just make sure that all your seams are, your center seam is completely closed, because if you have a gap there, I promise you, you will lose buckwheat holes. So if you're not going to put a patch in the center of some kind, you may even want to come from the back side and just sew, come to the back side where all your seams come together, and maybe just sew a piece of fabric over that, just so no buckwheat holes will escape, because they do try to escape through your zipper, through whatever. So we have to make sure that they don't. All right, but I am going to do my logo, and I'm going to place, mine has, I don't know if you can see it or not, but mine has the third eye right in the center, so that is going to go in the center of all of my seams. So I have my pins, and I'm just going to, it takes a little bit. You have to be careful pinning, because you want to pull your pillow around underneath the patch and get it as flat as you can. So I pin right at each seam. So because I want to make sure that I sew my seam allowance down in the direction that I pinned it. Now this may take you a couple of times to get it just right, laying just right. Remember, you have a lot of seams coming together, you have seam allowances going in one direction. It's okay if it takes you more than one time to pin your patch on correctly. I've done this many times, so you know, I did it the first time, but if you need more than one time, go ahead. And I'm actually going to put some extra pins in. I pinned on each seam allowance, making sure that it's going in the correct direction, and you'll see why later. All right, so I have many pins in that patch. All right, hopefully you can see that. Okay, so I'm going to set this one aside, get my top piece, same thing. I know which direction I've laid my seams, so I'm going to take my patch, put the third eye, which is the center, right in the center of all of my stitching where they've all come together, and I'm going to start pinning on top of my seam allowance. So you can see it better on this since I have two fabrics. So my seam is going in this direction, so I'm going to make sure that I pin right on top of that seam allowance so that my seam allowance will go down in the right direction. Okay, now it's just a matter, again, it may take you a couple of times to get this patch pinned on straight without lots of wrinkles. Again, it just takes practice. Okay, I'm moving on to my next seam allowance. I'm making sure I've got my hand underneath, and I'm making sure that it's laying down in the direction that we ironed it, and I'm pinning it down. Iron is popping. All right, so here I am at the next seam allowance. I'm going to make sure that seam allowance underneath is laying down in the direction. And you know, I may get to this one and realize, oh no, I've got to take it out a little and readjust. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with having to do it over. Sometimes I'll sew something and have to take it out. We all make mistakes, and that's okay. It's part of our learning process. All right, so all of my seams are laid down, and this one, for some reason, I don't feel like I need to put more pins in it. But so now you can see that I have my patch right in the center of my top piece, and I have it right in the center of my bottom piece. And some people, when they make pillows, they don't put their label on both sides of whatever pillow they're making. I've seen it done both ways, but I like to have my label on both, just so that I can use it either way and not feel like it's on the wrong side. And then I have also ironed my strap. So I'm going to take this all over to the machine. You will you might have to change your top thread to a whatever color the outside of your patch is, because we're going to sew right on the edge. Mine is black, so I will use a black top stitch. That's pretty much the only time I am ever concerned about using the same color thread. With construction, I don't worry about using the same color thread, because I make sure my tension on my machine is set to where I don't see my stitches so much. So anyway, but I will use a black top thread for my top stitching. So I will see you over at the machine, ready to sew on our patches, ready to sew our handle. So I'll see you there.